What if scaling your business didn't have to come with burnout? This week, I'm talking with John Sampogna, co-founder of Wondersauce, and the guy who took his agency from 2 employees to over 100, then landed a successful acquisition, and still managed to stay balanced, creative, and actually enjoy the ride. In this episode, we get into what 6, 7, and 8-figure growth really looks like behind the scenes. How to build a team around what people love doing, not just what they're good at. Why mental balance sheets are just as important as P&Ls. How to stop chasing every target and start building with intention. And finally, what makes a clean, drama-free exit that doesn't mess with your identity. This isn't about hustle, it's about smart growth, staying sane, and designing a business that works for your life and not the other way around. If you're scaling, selling, or just trying to find some damn balance, this episode's for you. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Deeper Than Know podcast. Super excited to have Sam. I'm reading your last name. I'm already getting nervous that I'm going to say it wrong. I'm super excited to have John Sampogna. Oh my God, dude.
Do you want me to like chat it and phonetically?
No. I can say it. I just have to repeat it to myself 3 times and get in that.
Sampogna.
Sampogna. Okay. I'm super excited to have John Sampogna on the show today. John, welcome.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
John, I loved reading your bio because you've done a lot. And I'm like, where do I even start with that? So one thing that I found interesting, I mean, kind of how you outline, like I've done a 6-figure business, 7-figure, then even an 8-figure through an acquisition, now at leading, 100 employees. I want to start with tools and mindset. Like, how do you kind of go through all of that? And what are the most helpful tools and mindset shifts at each of those stages?
Yeah, I mean, mental tools or more so like the actual tools to do the job.
Let's do tools to do the job. Let's get a little bit more, in the weeds of the how to on the business, and then we'll shift on the mental side after. Let's do that.
Yeah, for sure. So, what I do is it's a services business. We're a business acceleration agency. So we basically work with brands on a number of things, everything from content and campaign development all the way through like helping them fix or build net new infrastructure, apps, websites, e-commerce experiences, etc. So it's a people business. So for us, it's really a constant juggle, whether you're 2 people or 100 people, of how to maximize your people so they're most creative, they're most strategic, and most importantly, they're happy, so they stay around, because your only real intellectual property are your people. So whether you're starting out and you're literally just trying to hire people, once you have some clients coming in to ultimately do the core jobs, whether that's project management, creative, etc., or you're making bigger investments around people to lead teams. I think those kind of principles around keeping people happy and productive are the most important things. So it's a constant kind of like juggle of that, at any stage of growth.
Um, what do the different businesses look like? A 6-figure, 7-figure, and 8-figure business. Walk me through maybe the timeline of the career as you were transitioning, and then I'm going to ask. I loved what you said about the people and they're your intellectual property. I'll get into that in a little bit as well.
Yeah. So it's funny, when we started the company, it was myself and a business partner, and it's incredibly small. And I remember the first time that we kind of signed our first 6-figure project. It was like $115,000, and it was like, wow. And your first instinct is like a little bit of panic, where you're like, we got to deliver this now. Obviously, you're really happy, and then you immediately go into kind of like problem solving mode around not only how do you deliver it, but how do you make the work incredible. So I feel like we really loved what we do for a living. And it was one of those things where if you don't like what you do, I really think starting something is incredibly challenging, unless you're like in that 1% where you're so good and you can kind of just suck it up for 10 hours a day and be so good and then completely turn it off. But for the majority of us, you have to, I think, be really good at what you do and like what you do for you to be competitive. So when we were first starting out that $100,000 project, it was all about doing a great job, but it didn't feel like it was necessarily work, because we were passionate about like ultimately delivering. And once you get kind of comfortable in that zone and you do a number of projects in that range, you start to set your sights on like, what does a 300, $400,000 engagement look like? And then it kind of just scales up. But at the end of the day, like for me, I'm super competitive, but I really just want to deliver. And if you deliver and the work is good, your word of mouth will be strong, your reputation will be there, and people will refer you and trust you. And ideally, like the same principles you go in to tackle a smaller project will go into tackling a larger project. The team might be a little bit larger, timelines might be a little bit more aggressive, but ultimately, those same principles, if you're in the services business, should apply. I just think it's really, really essential to, from the beginning, like do the right type of work for the right reasons. And I hear too many people kind of like getting into it because they think it's like an advantageous way of making a lot of money. Not advertising or marketing, just startups in general, entrepreneurship in general. So I think like starting it for the right reason gives you kind of a competitive advantage
Yeah.
early on.
And I think like I went through that. My first company was a solar company and all I wanted was money. And then I got it. I got a 7 figures exit. And then it's like, wait a second, my life's not even any different, you know?
Yeah.
And then that helped me kind of refine it with Dirty Dough. I'm like, okay, no, I want something that I'm passionate about. It's not just the money, it's money and passion. And I did that. And then I exited that. And now I think at each stage, it kind of helps me refine the next stage in my life. And right now it's like, okay, no, I want money and a passionate business, but I also only want to work 30 hours or less. And now that's what I'm doing with my
Yeah.
franchise brokerage. And as you get in there, at least for me, like I learn what I want and then what it's missing. And then I could go kind of grab that. What's your advice to somebody? I mean, you said, make sure you're doing it for the right reason. For me, that reason has to be an emotion that you're after, because I think that's all we are as humans is like, we just want an emotional state. For me, I missed the target because I just wanted $1 million. And then I got it. And then I was like, crap, this didn't fill me up what I wanted because I didn't define what I wanted.
It's funny. Early on, someone that was a bit older and way more successful than I was told me something similar. They said, look, like chasing dollars, you're never going to have enough and you're always going to have a new number in your mind. So remove it from your mindset. Whatever that number is now, I can tell you this, like, are you having fun? And I was like, yeah. He's like, do you have good friends and like relationships? I'm like, I do. Yeah. Yeah. He's like, do you go on vacations? I'm like, yeah. He's like, okay, so that next level up, you're going to eat at slightly better restaurants, maybe take a better vacation, and you're going to care a little bit less about those types of things, quite literally those things. And I was like, that's not true. And I kind of blew it off. And as I've gotten older, I'm just like, that's true. It actually is fairly accurate. It's very funny. So like money is important. You need it to live. You need it to accomplish goals, but it should not be everything. And I also love what you said around the 30-hour thing, because I think everything going on with AI, but ultimately, like, there's going to be a way to make our lives more efficient. There already is. And I think that if you have clear boundaries around work life, it's okay to grind. Like, I remember, working 15-hour days consistently because we had to. But that isn't something I necessarily want to glorify or talk about forever. I don't think that's sustainable. If you're doing that for an extended period of time, you might want to like check your business, and it's probably not a good one because it's not sustainable. So I really think that like figuring out how to make yourself at your best for the hours you have on a weekly basis is ultimately, you know, a good
And,
goal to have, and it helps with a lot.
and I think the bigger the company gets, the more applicable that is. Like I heard something on Jeff Bezos. He's like, I make a lot of money not for making a lot of decisions. It's just making a few decisions a quarter. They just have to be the right ones.
Mm,
And it's like, okay, so how do you put yourself in a position to make those right decisions? Like, and there's kind of two ways, and I'm sure there's a blend of it, but it's like, I'm just going to work and gain as much knowledge and stress and freak out and try to control everything. Or it's like, I need to be in a more relaxed, non-stress state in my body to allow me to come up with a little bit more creativity. And you can, I don't know, I'm starting to get into that. And even like all the great mathematicians, like we'll talk about their brain going blank first and then the problem coming off, and it's
yeah.
settling down, sharpening the saw, right? Rather than just continuing to saw.
Yeah. And, the idea around, how do you like what you do and make that a thing? And, obviously it has to make sense, right? You can't be like, oh, I really like playing baseball, but I got cut from varsity 15, 20 years ago. Yeah, you're not going to be a pro baseball player. Move on. So it's like, for me, I've always been intrigued by technology, by brands and how they work, by different business models. So like working in an industry where I get to be exposed to so many different types of businesses and be on the front foot in terms of trend and tech was always interesting. So when, we flash back 15 years ago when we first started out, and it's the weekend and I'm spending like 3 hours just like on blogs reading. I'm tinkering with things. I'm watching videos. That's just like a Saturday. I'm not like working, but like I feel like people constitute that type of stuff as work, but I don't. If I'm like right now setting up a GPT or something like that and messing around with AI to try and keep myself smart and grow my knowledge there, and someone pings me and they're like, "Hey, can you jump on a call?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. I'm just messing around." I don't consider that actually work. So I think that like if you find something that you find yourself in your spare time on, in the evening when you're watching TV and you're on your phone, if you're like reading stuff that has to do with your job, you're on the right track. If it's such a clean cutoff where, like for me, I do like cutoffs too. I like balance where I don't necessarily want to be like responding to work emails all hours of the day, but like growing and building my subject matter expertise on specific things, I don't consider that work because I like what I do. So for me, that's always been a competitive advantage because I know there's people that I compete with that are exactly the same way. And if you don't do
Yeah.
that, you're going to be behind.
Yeah, I mean, it's because the money, whatever the motivation is, the money, you're going to hit a point that it's just not worth the stress. But either it's worth the stress or the stress isn't quite as high or not there if you're doing what you love you're doing. If you do, if you're doing what you love to do. So that reminded me of something else as well that you talked about, employees, making sure that, putting them in a position that they're good at and what they like to do. My first business, that solar company, I was very fortunate. My brother was my partner in it. And I didn't know how to interview people. And that was one of the questions he asked. And he kind of taught me through the, like, it doesn't matter how good they are at dialing phones. If in the interview, that's not their number one, two, or three things that they like to do, like they're not going to stick, even if they're great at it. So he taught me how to strategize those in the interview questions. Like, what are the things you separate it from skill set? Like what's your good skills, what's your bad skills, and then what you like to do and what you don't like to do. And then you find those things that have the double crossover. And if they like to do it and they're good at it and that fits in your company, boom. Do you have any advice for the entrepreneur, how do I figure out what I really want? And what I like and what I'm good at. And I know you just went through it a little bit. Look at your spare time. So maybe what about employees? How do I hire employees in the right position?
I think that you need to be hyper aware of the end to end nature of your business. Whatever your business is, to get to A to Z to generate money consistently, you need to know the inner workings of all of that. I'm not saying you need to be an expert in all things. Like, so for instance, like we do strategy work, creative work, technology work, all that type of stuff, right? Um, Taking technology as an example, like I could speak the language. I feel like I know a lot about it, but I can't code at any type of level where someone should pay me. And that doesn't matter, but I understand how to speak the language. I can interview people. I could like suss out when something doesn't smell right and someone's maybe taking me for like a walk. So like, but I know the business, right? So you have to first and foremost know the business. Second, you have to understand what are your biggest weaknesses or the things you really do not enjoy to do. And you build a priority list. For us early on, I remember like we had the partners of the business being the project managers for clients. And it was just like beyond being a bad look, like we weren't good at it. We weren't organized. We weren't, we just didn't like doing it. We knew how to do it at probably like a C plus level. And when you're like bootstrapping it, you can make it work. But I remember like circling that and being like, we need a great project manager, a great producer, someone who could like keep us organized, make us better at the things we're actually great at doing. So we kind of like, we targeted that. And, we knew enough about project management where we were able to describe the types of clients we have, the pain points that you would most likely encounter, the types of work we're going to be, jumping into, so we can vet and validate the right hire. But I think like and that also helps with like your mental health, the mental health side of things. If you don't like doing something, but you understand how to do it, that's like a no-brainer where you target to hire. So while it might be really fun early on to bring on a hyper creative person or a great technologist, if you can do those things and you enjoy doing those things, but there's something that's like glaring that, you're just bootstrapping, focus there first. So that's kind of like how I prioritize where to deploy money, because the money is not infinite.
I like that. And looking at like the Rich Dad Poor Dad, you have two examples. If you ever heard of that book, the poor dad continued to specialize into one thing. I mean, a hyper focus on education and this specific education. And the more degrees he got, the more narrow his job opportunities got. Where the rich dad's advice was what you gave on, you need to know your business. You're not the accountant, but you need to speak the language. You're
Yes.
not the attorney, but you need to speak the language. And it's more of a, kind of 80-20 principle. What's the 80% or the 20% of this new industry that I could learn that's going to give me 80% of the knowledge? So
Yes.
anyways, I love that. And I think Chat GTP, I mean, I'm on it literally just that voice to chat thing every single day. Like, hey, I'm about to do this. It really helps me doing a lot of the prioritization lists. And then also like the knowledge gap for me, the biggest one was financing for Dirty Dough. Having a franchise company and corporate stores. And then we had a logistics company, and then we had a food company. And I'm like, how do you keep track of that? I feel a lot more confident now using Chat GTP. Anyways, with all of that said, I love that. I want to move into so you really have to know the weaknesses of the business, prioritize good and bad. I think that leads in really good. Like, what's the real cost of business? You talk about, I'm going to pause there. Mental balance. I just want to make sure I was reading it right. You talk about mental balance sheets. I'd love to learn more about that.
Yeah, this was honestly just like a trick that I used really early on to try and keep myself sane. I remember, like, again, you don't, no one that I didn't take a course, or I don't have an MBA on like how to run a business. So when we started this and we were like 26 or 7 or something like that, it was all new. And just like you said, like accounting and legal, like you need to know some of that stuff too. So I remember early on, the cost of doing business, the basic definition is just like the money you have to make each month to pay for your hard costs, your office, your software, your people, your travel, entertainment, etc. Right. And I remember like applying that same balance sheet of all the things that have a dollar amount to it to things that might come up running, the type of business that we have. So maybe it's a client. The first time that you have a client who like is really late on a payment that you were banking on. And you're sending them emails, you're not responding, you're super stressed out. You can't sleep that night. You don't know how you're going to make payroll. Okay, like, is that a one-off thing that's only going to happen this one time? Or is that the cost of doing business? It's the cost of doing business, because it's going to happen again and again and again. You have an unhappy client, you have an unhappy employee. So you start to have these things that are not random one-offs. They are reoccurring things that are more soft costs, but they weigh on you mentally and physically because they're stressful. And you have to figure out for every one of those things, you basically start to work into the size of your business. Let's say you're a 20-person business, you've got all your actual hard costs, and you have a bunch of soft things. Figure you're a 20-person business, maybe you're always going to have 2 or 3 incredibly happy clients. You're always going to have 1 or 2 unhappy people. You're always going to have a disgruntled employee. You're always going to have something on the legal or finance thing, that's whatever those things are, right? You figure out a process for how you go about mitigating it and resolving it, and ultimately who is the person responsible for it. So the next time that someone's late on collections, you have a collections policy, and someone goes through it, and all of a sudden, like, months and years go by, and you don't necessarily, as the CEO or the founder or whatever, you don't really think about collections all that much anymore because you have a process for it, unless
Mhm.
it gets really bad, and then you step in and you make a business decision. We should pause work, we should terminate this, etc. So for me, the cost of doing business was a mental balance sheet to basically just say, these are all the things. Some are just paying rent, some are dealing with this individual or the situation. These are the things on a month over month basis that are just completely normal. So you shouldn't lose sleep. These are all normal occurrences that it takes to run a business.
Yeah, I love that, because if you ask anybody, hey, do you know this is going to be hard? Yeah. Do you know it's probably going to be harder than anything you've tried? Yeah. And then it gets hard and you're like, what's happening?
Yeah.
And I remember probably, I think we all go through something like my whole business is going to change once I franchise it, because then I could start selling these at 30 grand a pop. Well, once I sell
Hmm.
my first 10 of them, then I'll have a few hundred grand. Then I just set the next target. Once I sell 100, once I get the first store open, once I get 50 stores open, and you just keep setting the target further and further, and then you're like, okay, how about I just realize that there isn't a target? Like, the issues that I'm having won't be solved by a target. They're just a cost of doing business. And that's a
Yes.
complete different mindset shift, because now you're not resisting and getting scared and stressed and, acting based on fear on all of these soft costs of business, as you put them, which I love.
It's interesting too, because the cost of doing business always evolves. So the same problems you're having when you have 30 franchisees, you're going to have, you might overcome that when you have 50, but with 50 will be more things
Another
you didn't
problem.
think of that get introduced. So it's a constant, just kind of like whack-a-mole situation where you start to, you know, take on more and more things to your balance sheet, which leads to more and more, you know, ways of operationalizing your team to handle different, different situations.
Yeah. And you usually, I mean, I guess that's what business is about, right? Is being able to weather the storms without losing the sleep and realizing that the storm is okay. Storms come and they go. Up until, I mean, you had an exit. Walk me through the time, or what was the timeline through your acquisition?
So we started the business in 2011 and we sold it to our, I'm still with the company. We sold it to a holding company called Project. It's a independent network of, I believe, 14 wholly owned agencies back in 2016. So it was a long time ago now. It was almost 10 years ago. And we went from 2 people to 100 people from 2011 to 2016 so fast. It was just not it was not something we really accounted for. And um, we got to this point where so much of our time was spent doing operational things, accounting, finance, legal, that we never got a chance to really like focus on clients and the work anymore. And we found a home that allowed us to basically continue to operate as entrepreneurs and um, have some back office support and some scale to allow us to focus on what we really want to focus on. So it was a really, really interesting lead up to that moment, and then obviously going through like the earnout and then post earnout. And it's been I always hear horror stories about acquisitions, and I have to say, like, it's been an amazing experience. Still here, and everything they're doing is right because they're able to retain founders, which is
Yeah.
incredible.
And I'm sure a lot of it is their ability to retain founders, but a lot of it is also your mindset on, what a good acquisition is, and what a bad acquisition is. What's your recommendation as a founder to make it a good acquisition?
You have to be honest with what you want out of it, with yourself and also with the potential buyer. So we were completely honest. We said, you know, like, we had a number in mind money wise. Like, the money obviously has to be right. Like, we're not going to say, like, we love you, so we'll take a 90% discount, but we have a general range on the dollar amount. So you have to have an idea of, like, is that first payment going to be enough for you? That's one. I think two, going into it with what you want personally. So we went into it saying, we are not done building. We're not done with this story. And we want to find a place that we can actually operate and work where we don't feel like the culture is going to change. And then I don't want to feel like I have a boss. So that was like very evident. Um, and I think like the other side of that coin would be if I was truly looking for an exit and an out, where I went to them and I said, I think if that's what you want, you better make sure your company is actually like ready to run without you. And you should be honest with them because the deal structure is going to be different. And they may not be interested in buying you if you're going to leave in 12 months or 18 months. So you can just simply say, I had my journey here. It was amazing. I've operationalized everything and I'm ready to leave. This is my exit. Here's the team that's going to be taking it, and then they can do proper due diligence on those individuals. But I think like you don't want to bait and switch. If you say like my story's not over, I want to build, I want to stay here, and then you bounce, that's not good. it's going to jeopardize your reputation. So I think like going into it with like a realistic dollar amount and ultimately like the situation. Is this a place where you're going to continue to grow or are you going to ultimately leave? So those are the two things I really, really thought about. And I still come back to when people come to me and they're like, we're considering this. And I start poking away. And then you can tell like they've immediately like not thought of the most simple one, which is really like, do I actually want to stay here post
Yeah.
acquisition?
Yeah, I got that advice because I went through an acquisition just in September, sold to a crave-worthy brands. They own a bunch of other restaurants, and
Congrats.
kind of going through like what's going to what do I really want after? What do I want after? Well, before going into it, I'd already wasn't ever the CEO. I'd hired a CEO, and it was and then this guy came in as CEO, so it's kind of an easy decision. But I was very clear on that as well. Like but I didn't want to do it. Like I need a new industry, a new something every few years. And I do think that that advice was really good. Not getting into an employment contract and like, but here's some loopholes and I can still do some stuff on the side. It was just very like,
Yeah.
no, you
Just
guys
keep
are
it
already
clean.
running it. You're already the CEO for the last 10 months. You know the business. I'm gonna step out. If you need me, call me. But for me, that I mean, it was a very it was a much cleaner break. And then there's a little bit of like, I'm no longer the dirty dough guy, and kind of there's the whole mental thing on there. Did you go through any of that? I imagine not because you're still the CEO 9 years later, but was there any like identity crisis of like, this isn't my baby in the same way that it was?
Honestly, no. It's again like we there's accountability, but they trust us to operate and guide our business to where we think it will succeed, and they're there to support and help. They're there to like lift us up if we're ultimately struggling. Um, but you know, I think there's like a couple moments when you realize that like you're not really the boss. You're in charge of your business, but you're not really in charge. And you know, that never really affected me because I knew what I was signing up for. Um, but I knew that like I wasn't ready when we sold to like completely abandon the Wondersauce brand and to fold it into something larger or to make it feel like something that didn't feel authentic to the way we built it thus far. So I'm fortunate to not really have that story quite yet.
I love that. I mean, and hopefully you don't have that because you don't ever have to go through that if you don't attach yourself to your damn business. Like you aren't your
Yeah.
business. I mean, in a sense you are, but like who you are literally, and that's kind of what causes that grief. Well, what about you check your bank account and the money hits, you sign the deal, like talk to me about that. Like what were those emotions or what were those emotions like, and how long did that last before you kind of reset to your normal dopamine levels, I guess, and you're grinding again?
It, it's such a boring answer. I didn't. I remember that moment. I was in a conference room in New York, and I remember getting like a tap on the window and like saying like, "Look at your bank account." And I remember like being like, "Okay," and then that was it. I just like kept working, and then I remember like I was driving out to outside of the city. It was out to my house, and I was just like tired, so I stopped at Applebee's and had like boneless wings. That was it. And then I went home. Like it was like the most like anticlimactic like acquisition story ever. Like that was literally it. And then I just kind of like moved on with my life and that was it. And I think like it's not like I never really wanted to like I don't know, I never really pictured what I would do in that situation. It was a funny one though.
So I think a lot of people kind of lead up to that and they think it's going to be a lot bigger and then it feels a little empty. If I'm interpreting what you're saying, it was like I never even placed a big value on that. Like I love what I'm doing on the day to day, and if that's true, like that's a really good example on you're focusing on the process, not the end result. Because if you focus on that end result, you may get it, you may not, and even if you do get it, it doesn't last, right? You have to go back to just enjoying that process.
Yeah. Um yeah, I think that if you make it all about money, I just don't think that's how you should operate a business and the goals shouldn't just always be monetary. Um so I don't know.
Yeah, I
Wasn't
mean,
really a thing for me.
yeah, give me. I mean, what are your goals from an emotional standpoint? Like, I want business or I want money. And again, I'm kind of breaking down. I think this is just how we operate as humans. Like, I want a business because I want the security, or I want the money, or the status, or the whatever that is. Um, and there's no right or wrong answer, but have you identified any of, like, I'm just after a joyful life or fulfilled life or a life with ease, anything like that that you're have an emotional target on?
Well, yeah, for me, it's all about balance. I'm not going to be good at my job if I'm burnt out. And I could do that 15 years ago when I was in my 20s and early 30s. I was able to just kind of like live that life. And I remember that life. But at 40, I can't do it. And I need to have um, family time. So I have a wife. I have a 3.5 year old. I that's my priority one. I need to make sure like I'm spending as much time with them as possible, and it's what I want to be doing. I need John time. I need to be scratching my itch around interests that I have and that are outside of work. I need to have selfish time for myself because that's what leads me to being creative and strategic at work. And then work. And I feel like if those other two things are in line, you're in your best position to ultimately be your best every single day. And yes, you're going to have weeks that are disproportionate and you're maybe like really stressed, working very hard on a big pitch or a big meeting. But it should go away and it should normalize. So for me, like those three things are kind of like the balance I always look for every single day. Because, when I say I need like John time, it's not just like watching sports. It's like being active, working out, running. Because, the more you do that, the better mentally you'll be on a day in and day out basis. So for me, it's just like basic stuff like that, just balance.
I love that. I mean, I've definitely leaned in heavily to the exercise and the fitness to just get your body right, because your mind is part of your body and your mind can't function right if your body's not, functioning properly. And I love that you brought up your kids. And I would say most people, like, why are you doing your business? For my family, right? And then you're like, but what does that mean? It's like, so I could have more time with them in the future. And you're like, wait, but why don't you just have time with them today? Like,
Right
why are
now,
you
yeah.
why are you grinding for 15 hours today, just to have a little bit of family time with them later when you kind of already have it. So anyways, but you don't realize that till you realize that. But hopefully we could kind of learn from each other's experiences and difficulties. John, I really appreciate your time. This has been amazing. Where can our listeners connect with you, connect with you on social media as well as your company Wondersauce?
Wondersauce, you can go to wondersauce.com. And you can connect with me personally on LinkedIn. I'm fairly active there. I'm sure you can link it up in the show notes.
And real quick on Wondersauce, if somebody's listening with a business interested in your services, kind of what's the ideal client as far as business size? Because there's people, with one franchise location, and there's people that have multiple businesses, right? But what an ideal client for you?
Yeah, so we're a business acceleration agency. We help brands get out of stagnant growth, whether that's from an awareness and acquisition standpoint, where we help them with content and media to break thresholds, whether that's from 5 million to 10 million, from 10 million to 100 million revenue targets. And then we also do the like more digital transformation work where it's about, building tech, e-commerce apps, websites, etc. I'd say like a brand that's spending, you know, all in on marketing, $1 million dollars and up. And that's not agency fee. That could be media and fee, whatever. But yeah, that's kind of the zone.
Okay, I love it. Last question for you: is there any philosophy or quote that you live by that's really helped you out, either business or personally, mental health?
It's just, I don't even know where this came from, but it was a joke that we always used to say at Wondersauce and still to this day. But it's never easy. That's just something we always say. It's
Hey,
kind of a joke now.
I love it. I was asked that question. Usually I don't ask that question. I was on a podcast earlier and somebody asked me that. I said, desires the root of all suffering, which is like Buddhist. And what you just said is kind of the same, like it's hard. It's setting the expectation that it shouldn't be easy because that's what causes the suffering. And that, anyways. So I think our quotes were similar, maybe. Anyways, John, loved having you. I appreciate it. Till next time.
Thank you.